Start off with asking a few questions. Just think to yourselves about your answers. You don't have to share them or anything like that. So, first, is this a protest or a riot? Is this an insurrection or a stand for freedom? Is this a terrorist or a man fearing for his life? Now, while some of us may have differing answers to these questions, there are two common threads. First, all of our answers are a matter of perspective. Second, regardless our answer, the material events themselves don't change, only our understanding of them. That said, the significance in the slides I've shown you lie not only in the events or in the actions of the people themselves, but also in how we view these events and actions. I'd argue that perspective actually carries more weight, because it's perspective that determines how we move forward in response to these things. Death is death. You're no longer alive. But perspective is what says whether a funeral is a time for mourning or a time for celebration. In 2020, Jacob Blake was shot by a police officer, an objective truth. But perspective is what led some people to launch community-based social programs to lessen police presence and led others to carry rifles across state lines. Kyle Rittenhouse killed 2 people, but perspective is what determined whether he was jailed for murder or exalted as a hero. Perspective is what says the Boston Tea Party was a patriotic response to an oppressive government, but the events of 1992 Los Angeles were a riot. What's more, perspective not only affects how we examine history or current events, but also how we look at society at large and where we as individuals and people fit within it. What we consider to be reality is based on how we view our material conditions. The thing about perspective, though, is it's fluid. It tends to change and morph the more we learn. It evolves as we're exposed to more pieces of the puzzle. When we look at perspective this way, we begin to see how vital it is in the quest to create a better world. We see that challenging perspectives isn't just a fast time for Facebook contrarians, but a revolutionary act. So if the way we approach the world is based on how we view it, and the way we view the world is shaped by what we've learned and been exposed to, we must ask the question, what exactly are we learning? Now, I'm not here to talk about the shortcomings of American primary school education, but in regard to perspective, it's worth noting the educational climate we live in. We live in a time where seeking to understand racism is routinely banned. Politicians attempt to criminalize accurate depictions of history for fear of making white people uncomfortable. Do we think black children are comfortable when they're told their history is one of suffering and subjugation, or is comfortability perceived differently in this circumstance? The inevitable one-class period during Black History Month, where we're taught about Malcolm X, it said that he was supposedly a Muslim radical who supported anti-white violence, a villain, but being attacked by dogs in the street by those very same white people was perfectly acceptable. This perspective would never lead us to believe that Malcolm said things like, "I have eaten from the same plate, drank from the same glass, slept on the same bed or rug while praying to the same God as fellow Muslims whose skin was the whitest of white, whose eyes were the bluest of blue, and whose hair was the blondest of blonde. The things I've seen and experienced on this pilgrimage have forced me to rearrange much of my thought pattern and toss aside many of my previous conclusions." Malcolm is pointing out not only the fluidity of perspective, but also how challenges to his perspective via exposure to new things caused his to change. I never was taught that, though. So, as a black child in America, searching for identity, as all children do, where do we turn to truly learn about ourselves and the possibilities of what we can be? If not school, then where? Having a supportive family base is a luxury not all of us have. The reality is, whether consciously or unconsciously, a lot of times we turn to media and entertainment. Entertainment can shape our view of the world much the same way education does. The difference is, with school, we know the goal is to learn. We're aware perspectives are being given to us, so it makes it easier to reject them if need be. We kind of look at school like an isolated chamber separate from the real world. We've all heard kids who've gotten a bad grade in pre-cal say things like, "I'm never going to use this in real life anyway." That implies to them, school isn't real life. Entertainment, though, we look at as a reflection of reality. And in this arena, the The fact that perspectives are being given is much more subtle. Propagandas and ideas get to dance in front of our face behind the guise of fiction. Decades of sitcoms tell us the standard family unit is a white, hetero, upper middle class, nuclear family. If that doesn't describe you, well, you must be a deviation from the norm. When I was 15, it seemed the only time I would see black people associated with wealth was in music videos. And while there are plenty of financially successful rappers, not every affluent black person is a musician. But how would one know that if you never got to see it? And what we see matters. See, entertainment isn't just art imitating life. For many of us, it's escapism, a chance to leave behind our worldly woes and let our imagination soar, especially with science fiction and fantasy, a favorite genre of the comic book medium. The caveat, though, is that for black kids, even in the places we escape to, we don't get to see people that look like us. We're not even encouraged to imagine ourselves in different ways. And trust me, kids notice this all on their own. When I was young, my first love was an anime called Dragon Ball Z. I watched it faithfully. I made up my own characters. I pretended to be the characters. But in the back of my mind, even though this set me on my current career path, I always knew something was off. There was no one that looked like me. Well, there were these blatantly racist caricatures. But this doesn't look like me. And my friends and I at the lunch table made a conscious effort to ignore that. Instead, we decided another character was actually the black one. Let's take a look at that character. Piccolo. A green, chaotic neutral from a different planet. Not black at all, not even human. But on some level, we, a group of 9-year-olds, were so hungry to see ourselves represented that we latched on to anything we could relate to even a little bit. Unfortunately, all we had was a green alien. Imagine if the depictions didn't make us feel marginalized. Would my friends have continued to draw? I pored over anything science fiction, and I loved all of it. But still, in the back of my mind, the question always lingered, Dad, ain't no black folks in the future? But fret not. The same hammer that can be used to destroy can be used to build. We can use entertainment to give representation for those that need it while also painting a picture of what the world can be. I should note, though, representation isn't the end-all be-all. Without action, representation is just tokenism. It doesn't matter if you get to see new possibilities if you don't have access to the resources to make those possibilities a reality. That said, I also think that in order to do something, you must first believe you can do it. And it's very difficult to believe you can do something when you're constantly told or shown that you can't. And that's exactly what's happening when the hero never looks like you, or the only time you see yourself in your favorite show, you're being caricaturized. But it doesn't have to be that way. So, now what? Well, now we use entertainment to our own benefit. And when I say we, I don't necessarily mean black people. I mean the sum total of the human race that wants to see an end to oppression and injustice. And that brings me to my main point, anime and comic books. I know it may not seem like that based on what I've been saying so far, but I promise I'm here to talk to you about comic books. So, a lot of the ideas I've been discussing are starting to manifest in shows like Abbott Elementary, Insecure, Atlanta, work from N.K. Jemisin. But when it comes to challenging perspectives, comics are a uniquely impactful tool for a few reasons. First, comics have an undeniable connection to the youth. They have a negative stigma attached to them that only makes kids like them more. And they kind of have this punk rock effect in that they represent a counterculture lifestyle that gives community to its fans. You don't just like anime and comics. It becomes part of your identity. You wear the t-shirts, you decorate your room with the figurines, you get the tattoos. But what if these tattoos represented something more than the stories that they came from? Next, comics get kids to read, and we all need to read more. I'm not even spending time supporting that statement. We need to encourage literacy. And comics do that, though not conventionally. See, the Western perspective of sequential art is that it holds no real literary value. And while that may be bad for the image of Hajime Isayama, Brian K. Vaughan, or Art Spiegelman, it's also a double-edged sword. The other edge is comics become more appealing to kids who don't want to read. I'm talking about the kids who may never pick up a copy of Stokely Speaks or Wretched of the Earth, but have read hundreds of chapters of Naruto, One Piece, and Saga. Thanks to comics, these kids are readers and they don't even realize it. Last year, I was called upon by AMP and JCPS to teach a comic book course for some local high schools. At the beginning of every class, the students would read a different comic. So many parents reached out to me to say how happy they were that their kids were reading. They had tried and tried different methods, but it was comics that did the trick. And despite the Western perspective, comics do hold literary value. Attack on Titan is a beautifully written examination of different responses to fascism. Mouse is a Pulitzer Prize-winning interview with a Holocaust survivor. Thanks to comics, kids got to explore these ideas without feeling like they're being forced to read. To them, they're not reading at all. They're escaping. Why aren't we giving them better places to escape to? Why aren't we using this to deliver the positive ideas we know they're not getting in school? Lastly, because comics use both visual and linguistic modes of communication so heavily, they can deliver ideas in a way no other medium can. Nothing plants the seeds of an idea better than the written word. Words can slither into the crevices of your mind and lie dormant, waiting for the perfect moment to bloom. But reading is one thing. Seeing is something else. When we only read about tragedy and injustice, our minds tend to turn the atrocities into abstractions. The tragedy exists only so long as your eyes are on the page. So in this regard, reading helps us to understand, but seeing adds a tangible layer that helps us to feel. When I read about the murder of George Floyd, I was upset. My mind triggered its defense mechanisms and turned the information into just that, information. George Floyd didn't have a face. His death was an idea. It was easy to compartmentalize. But when I saw the video, when I saw Derek Chauvin's knee digging into Floyd's neck as he screamed out, I was outraged. I was repulsed. I was motivated. This was no longer a statistic or a series of words on a Twitter timeline. This was a human being that looked like me, having his life unjustly ripped from him in the middle of the street while people filmed it. The pain I felt from witnessing such tragedy moved me in a way that only reading about it couldn't. And that's the thing about comics. You have to read them and look at them. Comics can give you the words to plant the seeds and give understanding while also providing the imagery to concurrently make those seeds bloom. What other medium can make this claim? It's for these exact reasons that I make comics now. I pivoted from a 12-year career in music to comic writing because I'd been compelled to deliver a message, and comics were the best vessel. To me, Blackheart isn't just about telling an entertaining story. I saw an opportunity to be an example for all the kids doodling in their notebooks or daydreaming of fantastical worlds. I want to show them you have a talent, and this talent can be a viable career path, even without outside help. I wanted to highlight the intersection between Black culture and geek culture, not because I'm trying to create Black geeks, but to provide affirmation for the plenty that already exist. When you never see yourself, it's easy to gain the perspective that you're an outsider. Blackheart's goal is to give the perspective that not only are we welcome here, we belong here. Spider-Man wearing a pair of Jordans or T'Challa leading a war charge is only the tip of the iceberg. We need even more because most of all, my goal is to give Black kids a chance to see themselves from a perspective different than the ones most often provided. The industry we love so much at times doesn't seem to love us back. That leaves it up to us to love ourselves. We must be willing as a people to be open to new perspectives. We must be willing to challenge the perspectives of others. We have to do the work necessary to give positivity to our most impressionable, the youth. For a long time, to me, Black representation meant Black trauma, slave stories. And while slavery is a part of American history and its ramifications need to be understood, when all you see is slavery and trauma, it stops being history and starts becoming identity. Black folks aren't just victims of slavery. Black people are lawyers, scientists, doctors, architects, painters, poets, and parents. Black folks are human beings. And that's not a cry for bigots to see the humanity in others. I don't really care about that. It's encouragement for us to see the beauty within ourselves, to look at ourselves in new lights. Something like skiing shouldn't be racialized, but it's common perspective that certain activities are for white people and other activities are for Black people. This is what needs to be challenged. We're all aware of the bloody past of the United States. That's what history books are for. But there are no textbooks for what the future will look like. It's a matter of speculation. But that's why we have speculative fiction. That's how we reach the youth. How many kids got to be introduced to the philosophies of John Calvin and Thomas Hobbes through Calvin and Hobbes? How many people got to look at the idea of colorism within the safe space created by the Boondocks? We need even more, because for all of us, the goal should be to create a better world for all of us. And with comics, we have something that can reach the youth, get them to read, and give them ideas in brand new ways. We have something that can push people to that point of realization where they can say, hey, maybe there's a different way to look at this. When I started seeing comics in this light, it stopped being something that I could use to make the world a better place and became something that I should use to make the world a better place. And I think that's true for anyone who has the ability. But hey, that's just a matter of perspective. Thank you.